alaikum everyone and welcome to Pathways. So my name is Tasnim and I'll be your host for tonight inshallah. So as you know, Pathways is primarily a show directed at the student population where we give advice on a whole different range of issues. However, I personally feel... Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome to Pathways. My name is Tasnim and I'll be your host for tonight inshallah. So as you know, Pathways is a show primarily aimed at the student population where we give advice on a whole range of issues. However, I personally feel that we don't talk enough about student well-being. So tonight we'll be taking the opportunity to have this conversation. Mental health is arguably as important as, if not more important than your physical well-being for a number of reasons. For example, if you have diabetes, you can easily go to the doctor and they can run a blood test and bam, they'll find out you have a high blood sugar. However, whilst in this case, the signs of faltering health are very, very visible, on the other hand, those with mental health issues don't have visible symptoms often because they hide what they're feeling. And this often means that they enter a vicious cycle of suffering. So, tonight will give you some insight as to what mental health actually is, how it poses problems in today's society, and also how we can help those that we love. Tonight we have been joined by 4 guests. So we have Tasnim, who is a wellbeing representative at Imperial College London. We have Mr. Joel Elmia, who is the founder of the charity Our Minds Matter. And we also have Amini and Fatima, who will be sharing their personal experiences. And I really appreciate, the courage that, this takes. So thank you so much for coming today. Okay, so I think before we begin, because it is such an emotionally charged topic, it is important to, make clear any definitions and things, because it is quite a technical subject as well. So Tasneem, can you tell us about what mental health means to you?
Yeah, so I think it's generally a state of emotional and psychological well-being. And everyone has mental health. Mental health can either be good and it can also be poor. And so when mental health becomes poor, it can then lead to mental health conditions.
And can you elaborate more on mental health conditions, examples of what these may be, and specifically relate them to today's younger population?
Sure. So some very common ones that maybe a lot of people might have heard about are depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, but mainly depression and anxiety are the ones that are quite popular. I say in a good way, it's not a good thing. It's very common in the younger generation as well, and it's essentially two of the things that usually come up in the kind of younger age. So you start getting symptoms then, like before the age of 14, and then it can then develop into adulthood. Why it relates to young people is because in recent years there's actually been an increase in the incidence of depression, anxiety and other mental health disorders in young people today. And we don't know exactly why that is, but there are a range of factors that we need to consider and we can think about in terms of the etiology and why that's happening.
Okay, thank you for that, Tasneem. Mr. Joel, can you please tell us about how your research, can you shed some light on this topic as well and what your research has kind of revealed about this topic?
With young people, we know the environment's a big factor. So in our research, we found that those who, for example, have more supportive environments have less relapse. Those with negative environments, we see them end up in a lot of mental health care sort of needs, particularly in terms of like being sectioned, coming to A&E, reaching out to the charity. So we know that the family environment for the young person is absolutely crucial to the young person's well-being.
And that's why we're having this show today, to kind of raise awareness on this topic and, allow family members to see this is possibly what, someone you love might be going through. So in terms of these actual topics, can you please tell us about the most common, kind of mental health disorders that you've seen a lot in your line of work?
So through the charity, even though, depression and anxiety are quite common, the ones who are coming through the charity are the ones who are experiencing severe form of psychosis. because I think
Sorry, can you please explain for our viewers what
Psychosis.
psychosis means?
it's an umbrella term for other medical sort of mental health conditions. So you might have schizophrenia, for example. But essentially, it's someone who's experiencing paranoia or delusional thoughts, could be hearing voices, or could be a visual hallucination too. Or it's something basically that's not real, but they're still experiencing that it's real to them. So essentially, that's the best way to, describe it in a layman's term. But essentially, what we're having in the charity is a lot of people coming to us to say, my son's got this issue, my daughter's got this problem. What do? We can't trust the health services because they might call her mad, might call her crazy, we might not see them, they might call us bad parenting. So we're getting those kind of issues. Although depression and anxiety is quite common, for the charity, people are coming to us as a last resort.
So there's a couple of things that seem quite interesting to me there. So you said that often it's the parents rather than those who actually need the help who are coming to you. So would you say that there is like a clear problem here where young people don't feel that they can maybe trust the authorities and open up and confide in them about how they're feeling, or what would you say the problem is here?
I suppose it's an interesting exchange. We always say, look, what makes you think it's the health service's responsibility? Why isn't it your responsibility?
Okay.
You take some ownership and some responsibility for your children's well-being. So you should be aware. You should know exactly what to do. You know exactly how to talk to that person, and not to make them isolated and start discriminating. You wouldn't do that with diabetes. Why would you do it here? In that sense. So we do get this confrontation bit, but that's the bit that when we challenge stigma and discrimination. So actually, look, have you got car insurance in your family? Good. Have you got mental health first aid? No. So already you're setting yourselves to fail. So when your son or your daughter is in trouble, or your sibling, you don't know what to do. Now, whose fault is that? Is it the health services? Is it us as a charity? Or is it the daughter or the son in that sense? Whose fault is it? I think collectively it's all our responsibility.
Yes. And I think there's a huge role in, education, especially, that I think it's less of an issue in our generation because we have been educated, in school. We have PSHE lessons back at school where they teach us about the relevance of mental health and how it can affect people. But I think there is a bit of a, chasm between the older generation and our generation where, that communication perhaps isn't as, as good as it could be. And maybe it needs some fine tuning. But
Can I add something to
Yeah,
that
go
as well?
ahead.
I think, especially with the South Asian community as well, I think there's a lack of understanding about mental health, and
Yes.
it's because most of the sort of older generation are kind of first generation immigrants in this country.
Exactly.
So it's a very new term for them. And I think what happens is in back home, Bangladesh, and even across South Asia, Pakistan, India, I think they have like an umbrella term that they use to describe anyone who has any mental health disorders, and that's called pagol, as in crazy. They say anyone who has, psychosis, depression, anxiety, any kind of mental health disorder, they're just crazy. And that's what I think drives that stigma. And then when, our generation comes and tells our parents or family and says, look, I have a mental health condition or I have depression, I think I'm struggling, they will be like, what does this mean? It didn't happen back in our time. Or there's a lack of understanding, basically.
Yes.
Yeah,
there's definitely a lack of understanding, and also parents need to also appreciate the fact that we're growing up in this society in the Western world where you don't have the same issues like cholera, and things in Bangladesh. We have, a lot of mental health issues, bullying, the role of social media, all these things play such a big role, in mental health, in young people specifically. Your image, the way you perceive yourself, it's a different kind of problem.
Even
And
for us as well as British, Bangladeshis and stuff, trying to kind of combine our culture, our religion, and then also integrating ourselves within the British society. That in itself is a huge challenge, a huge one, and especially for teenagers who are struggling with their self-image and self-confidence, self-esteem issues. That's going to be very difficult because they can't become exactly like how it is in their society, and then they can't also just completely hold on to their cultures. It needs to be somewhere in the middle, and I think that poses a lot of problems for a lot of young children now.
I agree completely. Before we move on, I just want to talk a bit more about depression and anxiety. So I was wondering if Mr. Jalal Mia, can you please explain what depression means in layman's terms?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk to family members, they ask this question. Normally they're looking for some clinical sort of diagnosis, label or description. We just say it's when essentially when your brain shuts down and therefore is unable to function. So the things that we use, the things like reasoning, problem solving, thinking, even coming up with rational thoughts, is when the front part of the brain actually shuts down, and then as a result your body shuts down, and then you can become into a state. But it can be defined into sort of three things. You could have mild, moderate, and severe types of depression, depending on the level of intervention you have.
And I think it's really important to kind of draw this, the line, the distinction between depression and feeling sad, because depression is a clinical diagnosis. It's not just, you have other symptoms, you have a whole range of issues infiltrating, this matter. It's not just about being sad. There's lots of other, facets to this. So Tasnim, can you please tell us about what anxiety means? Because it is, in this society, rife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anxiety is actually a very normal response to everyday stress. So it's that feeling of when you feel stressed out, you have a few physical symptoms that you can remember, I guess, like palpitations, so your heart beating really fast, your shortness of breath, so you find it difficult to catch your breath. Things like sweating, you might feel like this before an exam, you might feel like this before a performance like this, or being on TV. So those things are normal life stresses, and it's our body's kind of flight or fight response to try and protect ourselves, because our body thinks it's in danger. What's happening is, what happens with anxiety disorders is that our body then starts reacting to stress that we don't need to react to. So we excessively start experiencing this anxiety, to maybe looking at the number of likes we get on a photo and seeing that it's not enough. That
and this
could
is out
cause
of their
anxiety.
control.
It is, yeah, and it's not something they can control. And it might be seen as irrational, but for the person it's very real, physical, scary symptoms.
Exactly.
People can have things like panic attacks where they're collapsing, they think they're about to die, and it can be very, very scary. And the anxiety is a huge umbrella, because you can have things like social anxiety, so your fear could be like going out into social situations, meeting people, so you just want to stay at home all the time. Or it could be a phobia even, so you're scared of spiders. Like, how many of us are scared of spiders? So these seem irrational, but actually for the patient it's very, very real. Yeah.
And again, this, perception that a lot of people have about, anxiety and other mental health disorders being irrational is something that we need to, just wipe out. Like, we need to bring a stop to this. We need to stop this stigma, because it's not helpful, and it often means that those who face these very, very real problems don't feel that they can, they're in an environment where they can open up and say, look, I need help. I have, I'm suffering. So we need to create an environment, especially parents and siblings, because it all starts in the home. We need to create an environment in the home where, your children feel that they can come up to you and, confide in you and tell you exactly what's on their chest. And then through it, you can work together as a collective thing. Yeah? So, okay, so that's just a quick overview. It doesn't do justice to the topic, but it's a quick overview on, some of the definitions and the more technical aspects to, these mental health disorders. But I think we're going to, give you guys a spotlight now. Okay, so Amini, do you want to start, please, and just tell us about your experience in your own words?
Okay, just to start by introducing myself. My name is Amini. I'm a medical student at King's College, London. So, where do I begin? So I think my kind of experience with mental health started when I was 18. So I stopped my first year of university, and I've lived with generalized anxiety disorder, which you mentioned. I've also had a period of low moods, which was then diagnosed as depression, and my GAD, generalized anxiety disorder, then kind of progressed into panic disorder. And for anybody that doesn't know, panic disorder can come from having anxiety. And as Tasnim, you mentioned some physical symptoms. So what can happen is, with somebody with panic disorder can start hyperventilating, sweating, feeling like they're going to die, feeling like the world's going to end. So those are just some of the thoughts that somebody who's experiencing a panic attack can have. So yeah, when I was 18, I started university, studying medicine, and it was the first time I was kind of taking hold of my own education. So the gap between A levels and university is quite a big gap, and people don't really mention that. So it was the first time I was taking care of myself, and I kind of had to manage my studies. And yeah, I think a lot of anxiety came from the fact that I was different to everybody else. Coming from a public school, there were a lot of people in my course that came maybe from private schools, grammar schools, so it's a whole load of anxiety, like maybe I'm not as good as them. And it's normal to feel like that, but people just don't discuss it. And I feel like medicine being such a competitive profession, people don't always want to admit when they feel like they can't do something. And again, that's very normal. It's not just in medicine, anyone can feel like that. So the anxiety affected my studies, my focus. So the main thing I experienced was a lot of worrying. So I'd think, what's that person thinking about me? Are they thinking that I'm not capable, or does that person think this way or that way about me? So there was a lot of voices in my head, negative thinking patterns that kind of made me more and more stressed out, eventually leading to me then developing a panic disorder. It affected my studies, it affected my home life, it affected my relationship with my friends. So I'd overthink what I was saying to my friends. Was I saying the right thing? There's a whole, I think, also as you mentioned, with social media as well playing a part. So I would go on Instagram and Snapchat and Facebook and think, oh, these people look like they have perfect lives, and this person's a medical student and they do this and this and this, why can't I be like that? So a lot of comparing myself to other people around me and thinking that their life is perfect, and that's far from the truth. I strongly believe that if somebody's showing they have a perfect life in social media, that isn't the case. And that's something that I learned over the years. So you're right, social media plays a part, and it's a very different, generation to our parents, because I guarantee you a lot of people will tell you that if they try to explain that to their parents, how they compare their lives to the people they see on social media, they're like, we didn't do that, as you said. So it is that, difficulty trying to explain things to our parents who haven't been through that. So yeah, I couldn't really speak to my parents as much about that. So I think the people who understood me were more friends at university, older people at university as well. And I did actually get some help for my condition. So shall I tell you a bit about that?
Yeah, of course.
So
Please.
what happened was the condition was affecting my studies and my exams. So I had to defer some exams. There was an incident where I had a panic attack during an exam, and I couldn't finish the exam, and I had to leave, and it did really affect my life. So I had to have some provisions put in place for myself. So I strongly encourage anybody that's going through the same thing as me to kind of reach out for help, because universities, colleges, they're really supportive. And I found that my university was very supportive, and they put in kind of personalized provisions for me. So when I would have exams, I was allowed to take 15 minutes per hour away from the exam hall, just to sit on my own and just calm down if I felt anxious. And that's really important, understanding your needs. So I was able to communicate that. So people do listen. And especially at university, I do feel like that, the discussion for mental health is growing. That, and also I spoke to my GP, who referred me to some classes where I learned a bit about management, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT is basically kind of like a way of, I don't want to use the word rationalizing, but kind of understanding why someone's feeling worried about things, and bringing them back to their surroundings instead of in their thoughts. So for example, one way of doing CBT is understanding, okay, why am I worried? Where is this worry coming from? How is this worry really going to affect me? Is this worry going to affect me? So kind of trying to make sense of why I was worried, and that really helped. That, and also mindfulness. So trying to focus on my surroundings using my senses, so vision and like smell and in terms of like feeling where I am, those sorts of things, to kind of take myself away from the worrying thoughts. So I'd say, yeah, CBT, mindfulness, getting support from friends, family. Once I explained to my parents what I was going through, over time they did understand, even though they haven't been through that themselves. They could see how it was affecting me, and they did become a lot more understanding. And I think with some parents, because they don't know what's going on, they don't understand the need to educate themselves. So I think with my parents, because it happened to me, they then said, okay, well, something's happening to her and we need to kind of help her with that. So the situation presented itself and they found a way to educate themselves, if that makes sense, and become a bit more aware. With parents that don't have children that have mental health conditions, maybe they don't feel the need because it's not affecting them directly, but with my parents it was. And yeah, my mum was really supportive. When I had to do my exams and I had to repeat a year, she said, this is your dream, you've wanted this forever, you need to keep going. And yeah, that was really supportive on part of my mum. Do you have any other questions?
No, thank you so much for sharing your experience, because honestly, I understand how difficult it is for you to speak on this public platform about, all of this. So honestly, like, all of us at TV1 really appreciate, the role that you're playing, but you as well, although we're going to hear your experience after the break, which is going to come up shortly. Thank you so much, and we'll draw more on this after the break, so inshallah we'll see our viewers soon. Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome back. So in the first segment, Amini kindly shared her personal experiences with anxiety and her panic disorder, and also how she kind of soldiered through it, and which help, kind of helped her overcome these issues. And I'm now just going to ask you, Amini, like, often this journey is different for everyone. Everyone experiences something different. But I want to ask you, what made you finally, seek help?
So, as Tasnim rightly mentioned, anxiety is related to stress, and everybody has stress and everybody has these feelings of worry. But I had very heightened feelings of worry, and I had constant thoughts in my head like, you're not good enough and you can't do this. And realizing that it was affecting everything, not just, that's the thing with anxiety disorder, it tends to affect many parts of your life rather than just being stressed. So when stress leads to other things and causes more problems, I think that's when, you need to realize that you need to do something about that. So for me, realizing that the anxiety turned into panic disorder and then affected a lot of the things, a lot of my life, even with the exam, where I had the panic attack during the exam and I had to leave that exam, realizing I need help. So I think when things got too much, I just had to do something to help myself, and putting myself first was the most important thing. But I am, as a medical student, generally quite open-minded about mental health. I have no problems accepting that I had an anxiety disorder or a panic disorder. It can be difficult for other people to kind of accept that they have a disorder of some kind, but I am grateful that I've had that background, as a medical student, understanding that it's okay to have a mental health condition. So I think part of it was me being quite accepting. As a medical student as well, I realised I was able to kind of self-diagnose. We do that a lot, don't we? But I kind of self-diagnosed and realised, what, this is affecting my life, I need help. And I'm quite, as I said, I'm quite open about seeking help, so it was quite easy for me. But I do advise people, if, it's not as easy for other people to seek help. Maybe if you don't feel comfortable seeking help from a service, or the NHS or a counselling service, talk to somebody you're close to, somebody who listens, somebody who's empathetic, understanding, and that, maybe will be able to relate to your situation, because not everyone is confident enough to, be so open about their mental health. But whatever you do, don't struggle alone. Try to get some kind of help. That's the most important piece of advice I would give.
Yeah, that's probably the most toxic thing you could do to yourself, to be alone with those negative thoughts. And I think before, at the beginning, when we said, there's a big gap between, children and their parents, especially with the cultural differences and everything. I think this is an amazing example of where, when the need arose, as you said, your mom really don't know what I'm getting emotional, so I'm not even involved. Because I was thinking about my mum, I was thinking if I had something like this, I know my mum would really do everything she could in her power to understand and help me as well. So yeah, like as I was saying, the main point was the fact that there are lots of parents who are willing, you know, to help their, you know, their children go through something like this. So we need to look at the positives as well. Thank you so much yet again. And I think now let's pass it on to you, Fatima. So please tell us about your personal experiences.
Thank you, Tasnia. My actually mental health problem started in 2004, back in 2004, when I went through a major change in my life. I went through some health changes, which started my anxiety episodes. And at that time, I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what those feelings were. I didn't know who to ask for help. And it carried on. I just let it go. I thought it's normal part of life. So I carried on, and life went on, and you know, life changes carried on. I struggled to increase, and in 2015, my anxiety intensified when I went through another big life changes. And in 2017, it pushed me over the edge when it was like the last straw for me. And another big change happened in my life, which pushed me almost on the edge. And throughout this time, from 2004 to 2017, I got involved in the community, working, volunteering, and I learned, where I met Joel, and about mental health and what anxiety was. So in 2017, I kind of started recognizing what they were, but I didn't want to associate myself with it because it was so bad. I was cutting everyone off. I was blaming myself for every little thing that happened. So if the ceiling fell down, it would have been my fault. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't answering anyone's calls, I was missing my appointments, I was not going to work, I was turning up late. I couldn't look myself in the mirror. So almost anything and everything reminded of myself as a bad person. Anyone around me, I just thought, why am I here? I don't belong here. I'm not good enough. I'm not so similar to what you went through. I didn't know how to cope, and it just, everything I looked at reminded me of the weak person I was. I couldn't go to anywhere. My friends were there. I got to a point where I actually called my mom up, and I kind of said my goodbye, if you know what I mean. I was on the prayer mat, and I said, Mom, this is it. And she tried to calm me down. Then one of my friends called me. Sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional.
No, take all the time you need. Like, we really, really appreciate you even telling us this. You don't need to say this. Do you know what I mean? Like, thank you so much.
No, I do want to share it because the whole reason I think we're both here is we want people to know what it is, especially in our culture. It can be seen as, like you said, pagal, gone crazy. You know, there were statements that were made, sort your mood out. It's not a mood you can sort out. So that's why we're here. We want people to know that it's not a mood, give them the time. So one of my friends came, and she dragged me out of the house. And she literally dragged me out of the house and basically got me out of the situation so that I don't do something silly to myself. That helped. However, as soon as I was alone with myself, I was alone with my thoughts. I was alone with all the things I was thinking. I wasn't so much influenced by social media because I wasn't too into social media at that time. It was more of people around me, the way I talk. I thought people made fun of me because of the way I talk, the way I look. I'm too short, I'm too skinny, I'm too dark, I'm too this, all those. I was just looking at it, and I was blaming myself, the way I look. And I stopped answering people's calls. I blocked people. I blocked my friends when I didn't need to because I didn't want to answer anyone's calls. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Even my niece and nephew, who are my life, they're the one who actually saved me from all this. So even then, I stopped going to see them. I started making excuses, and I didn't want to do anything. Everything. I love belly dancing and martial arts. I stopped doing it. I stopped doing all the things that used to make me happy. All I want to do was sleep and block out the world. because I felt when I'm sleeping, I can't think of anything, I can't see anything. I could sleep for 24 hours if I wanted to. So I would wake up, open my eyes, go back to sleep. So I lost a lot of weight. I had a health condition, as I mentioned before, so I stopped taking my tablets. And what forced me, the question you asked, so I'm going to answer it. What forced me to get help was I was hospitalized for my health condition because it deteriorated due to me not eating well, not drinking well, not taking my medication on time. It deteriorated, and then they referred me to a therapist who I'm still seeing. What helped me get out of it is my mom. As I said, she was there. My sisters, my family who have been there. Although I didn't want to talk to them, they were there. They wanted to make sure that I was all right. My friends were there. And the main thing that helped me was, I know it's not an Islamic topic, but I started doing more Islamic research, more learning about Islam. I think that's what helped. So every time I would feel sad, I would start doing dhikr. So that helped me get out of it. So even now, recently I was hospitalized again because I had a severe episode again. This was, for me, was the last straw in terms of coming out of it. When I said to myself, I don't want this person. When I looked at the mirror, I couldn't recognize the person I was looking at. The person I was, bubbly, everything is fine, everyone is good, I'm good, all that I was. The person I was in 2004, that person wasn't there anymore. I couldn't see the person in the mirror. I didn't know who it was. And it scared me. All I was screaming, I actually did scream at myself in the mirror, saying, "Who are you? You know, why do you look like that? Why?" And it got to a stage where I was like doing things to my body, saying, "Why are you so skinny? Why are you this?" Making comments about myself to myself in the mirror. So at that point, I said to myself, "I don't want to be this person," because I recently took a job which is now helping me, and I didn't want to lose this job because previously it has cost me, like you said, your studies, it cost me my jobs, it cost me friends, very close friends, and I didn't want to go through that again. And what I got in touch with my consultants, and they referred me to a therapist. At the same time, I went into something called itikaf, spiritual retreat, I'm sure you know, and that helped me, and I started doing, La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minaz zalimin. Sorry, I'm not giving Islamic treat, but this is what helped me.
I think we also need to understand that, there are different ways of trying to overcome these issues, and often, especially from our background, a lot of us turn to Allah more, to try and salvage a situation.
Yeah. I did also have cognitive therapy. I did also have CBT in 2017. It did help, but then I couldn't go to the appointments anymore. I couldn't force myself to go to it anymore. And then recently was when I thought, I found myself looking for Allah more, at the same time saying therapist. I think we need both. We need the professional and the spiritual side, both. In my experience, I needed both. I needed my therapist telling me this is what you can do. Put yourself 5 tasks a day. If you can do 1, then give yourself a pat. So if you were to do washing, if you put 5 dresses, wash 1. That's something you achieved. So these are things that she would give me, small techniques to follow. This helped, but at the same time, I think when I'm sitting down with my thoughts, those steps didn't help. So doing zikr at that time, it helped. So I think for some people, for me personally, I needed both. So both of those helped.
That's an excellent point. I didn't mention the spiritual side. I also needed the spiritual kind of that therapy as well, as you mentioned. Really good point.
No, I thank you again so much for sharing your experiences and your tips as well, because I think people who are watching this who may be going through something similar but might not have reached out to anyone yet, might this might switch on the bulb or flick a trigger in one of our viewers right now. I think something that you said about people, you thought that people were talking about you or making judgments and things. I think that just again highlights how important it is for us, especially as Muslims, to think about how we speak and the way we conduct ourselves, because you never know how something you say may be perceived or received by another person. You may mean well, or you might mean it as a joke, but then your words can be really hurtful and, you know, bring about another series of actions which you'd never thought would happen, you know, in that other person. So you need to be really mindful about how we treat others.
Can I add something?
Yes.
I remember an episode where, I wouldn't mention any where, but people were sitting around. And, you know, with this, I don't know if you felt it, we feel happy and then instantly we can be angry or sad.
Yeah.
So there was an episode where I was happy and then my whole mood just went down. And then someone in that group had made a comment, what's wrong with you? Fix yourself up. It's not easy to fix ourselves. So those kind of comments literally did, and then that kind of can stop us from, people like us, from going out in the group again. Because if you think we need fixing, then something is wrong with us. So those kind of comments made us go down even more.
So you really need like self-belief, you need belief from those around you that, you know, you are fine, there's nothing wrong, you know, you have this support system. And also, again, that again shows just ignorance really and a lack of understanding about what's going on.
Can I add some other kind of unhelpful comments I've heard, like in my role and just in the
Yeah, go ahead.
community as well? So that's one of them. You need to fix yourself. Another one is put yourself together. It's not that big a deal. Stop overreacting. And then even actually so religion is, I think, very important for a lot of people. Islam, or if people are following other religions like spiritual, you know, having that support or faith can really, really help mental health. But actually some people then use it in a bad way and say, your depression is because you don't have enough faith, you don't have enough
And that's
iman.
very common.
And it's so common, especially in our culture and community. It's not actually a religious thing, but it's more of a cultural thing now.
Yeah.
Like they've just said, okay, the only reason you're depressed and you want to, you know, commit suicide or whatever is because you don't have enough faith. But that as well, imagine you had something like that, or maybe you have. It can be so horrible to somebody. So these things don't actually help people at all. And sometimes even when people are trying to help, they actually end up doing the opposite, and they're actually making it worse.
I think we should never, in general, especially in this kind of situation, be, you know, making comments about someone else's iman in general, because you don't know, you know, iman is something personal between you and Allah. So you don't even think about your own iman. No one is perfect. We can only strive to be as good as we can. So focus on yourself before, you know, even looking at someone else and making comments, because that's again another disgusting habit that a lot of us, you know, we do it subconsciously even, that a lot of us need to kind of just come out of. Okay.
I'd also like to mention actually on the point that Tasnim made, how people attribute mental health to spiritual reasons. So actually, funny thing is, a lot of people don't know that, you know, conditions like depression and anxiety, they can also be biological. It's not always to do with the environment. You're not always depressed because of your environment. It could be that your parents had severe depression and that could have passed on to you. So it's important to note that mental health isn't all 100% environmental, and it can come from your genetics, it can be biological. So if we use that reasoning, we can't just say mental health is because of a spiritual reason. And I think that's an important thing for people to understand, and maybe, you know, trying to educate people about that as well.
Yeah, we need to understand that it is a multifactorial thing, and there's lots of different things that can contribute to it. But we don't have long left, so I really want to talk about your charity work and, you know, what you actually do within your role. So can you please tell us a bit more about your charity, please?
You know, there's some really important lived experiences you've heard, and I think that's what we do as a charity. We provide a sort of space for people to talk about the experience, but not just about that. It's like, okay, well, what do you want to do about it then? So it's part of the empowerment trip, to say, actually, we don't see you as a victim or anything like that. We see you as an equal. To say, okay, well, what do you know, because you're the best person to come and tell us how to solve the issue that you've got. So sometimes it's about supporting people, for example, running a charity run that we're looking to organise. It could be a community cup football tournament amongst boys and young men. It could be a comedy night talking about laughter and how you use it to relieve stress. So our charity specifically aims to empower mainly people who've got lived experiences of mental illness, but because I think they are the ones who can tell us where to go with it in that sense. You know, and I think, you know, when you think about services or communities, they're best guided by these guys in that sense, because essentially they can see what we've not seen in that sense. And essentially they are the experts.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very important point that you've, you know, brought up there, because doctors, you can read a textbook and you can read about what anxiety is, but that doesn't mean you understand anxiety. It's a different experience for everyone who, you know, it goes through it, as you said. So that's, really appreciate that insight. Also, in terms of, like you said, you provide one-to-one support as well. So what are different strategies that, you know, you might use to try and help someone kind of come out of that state?
We try and avoid it. Obviously, we signpost those who need severe support, you know, immediate support signpost. But if they're unwilling to engage, we say, okay, look at the self-care sort of practices. So that means, okay, are we looking at how's the diet, for example? How's your rest period? Who can you go to when you're speaking to, when you've got problems? You know, so what can you do? What would you like to do? So it's about giving them the question and say, okay, you come up with your list. That's helpful to you because it's more meaningful. So in that sort of engage, they feel empowered, and it's the power's coming from you to them. And I think a lot of the health professionals, they're starting to change now, but they hold on to a lot of the power. And we know that when you have inclusion, participation, and also empowerment, showing care, compassion, the power shifts, and you can see a big change in the individual. And
in, you know, situations like, you know, anxiety, where you don't feel like you're in control of the situation, or depression, where, you know, your body shuts down, and again, you don't participate in things as much. You know, letting that person know this is your decision, you have control of your life. Again, like, that means so much to them. So again, thank you for that. And we're going to wrap up soon. But a sister has sent me some tips on how to be a student. Like, you know, if you're facing exam stress, or, you know, if you're experiencing something similar, these are some things that you could do to kind of come out of that. So she said, stay prayed up. So again, that relates to the spiritual side of things. So you might need some clinical help or expertise, but also the spirit, you need to feed your, you know, your soul as well. So staying prayed up, you know, having that routine, it helps. Speak to Allah. Also, getting to know yourself. So having that mindfulness, again, something that you guys talked about. So when you said, you know, you need to know how your body works, how you respond to different situations. You said that being a medical student was very useful because, you know, obviously you were able to apply what you'd learned to what was going on inside your mind. So learn, you know, what you're like, and then you can fight that, you know, and in a targeted way. Health and fitness. So if you eat healthily and on time, go to the gym, take part in fitness classes and things. Again, that just keeps you active. And like you said, it's kind of like, you know, in your charity where you said that you organise events where people kind of collaborate, they come together. Just being in that environment, you know, you're not alone with your thoughts and they don't get the better of you. So that's important. Also, this is something that, like, I didn't think of. The sister said, in terms of finance, make a budget. So as a student, you know, budgeting, financial problems, they can be quite, you know, stressful at times. So if you plan in advance and, you know, come up with, you know, a monthly budget beforehand, that can help reduce that burden. Okay, in terms of social support, this sister said that, you know, simple things like going home for dinner and having dinner as a family, things like that, where you collaborate with, you know, other people, just share how you're feeling with those you trust and those around you. Again, that has great value. And lastly, having hobbies. So again, it's just, don't sit in your room, don't be alone with your thoughts, because again, that's what we're trying to avoid. You need to keep yourself occupied so that your mind doesn't have time to wander. And if you have hobbies, it's also great for your, you know, your health. You can help, it helps develop your personality and things like that. So we're going to wrap up now. I just want to say thank you so much, you know, for coming on this journey with us, especially you guys. And really hope that this was useful to our viewers, because, you know, the whole point of this was to kind of raise awareness on mental health and its implications, and also to kind of share tips for those who may be going through it. One of the main lessons that I want you to take away is the fact that, you know, we have two living examples of, you know, what mental health issues can do to someone, but both these sisters, you know, sought help. They both sought help, and that helped them kind of overcome these issues. So it's really, really important to seek help. I know it's easier said than done, but you know, they are coming through the other side of it. It's not an easy thing to do, but that's the best thing you can do to help yourself. Okay, so thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks, inshallah.